What it do, Anime Nation? How you guys doing today? I'm coming at y'all with the third and final $5 a month plus Patreon rant request for the month of November. And today I watched Coherence, which is a movie from 2014, per the request of Aesop on Patreon. He mentioned that he's rewatching the movie soon. He's been itching to rewatch it. That totally makes sense because this is one of those movies that you cannot catch everything in on your first viewing. It is like impossible until you have the earlier parts of the movie recontextualized by what happens at the end to fully get a grip on the exact absurdly confusing narrative of what happens. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who have watched it over and over and over and over again. And it makes sense why, because, you know, it's easy to make a confusing movie that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's easy to kind of just like mess with, you know, time and alternate realities, alternate timelines, all that kind of stuff. But it's hard to also just make it a good movie. Not particularly so. It's just hard to make a good movie in general. And this movie is good. That was a really roundabout way of saying that. But it's something that, you know, listen, I'm the anime guru. I gotta make the anime comparisons. It reminded me a lot of an Umineko, like, closed room mystery, especially the way the entire second half played out. The first half was giving me much stronger vibes from, like, The Invitation, another horror movie from a similar time frame that Aesop also recommended me, which ended up becoming one of my all-time favorites. It really emphasizes that awkward, sort of uncanny feeling at a dinner party. It's kind of actually a weirdly specific vibe. It's got those like constant, like not a shaky camera, but like, you know, a little bit of an unstable camera that's like going from person to person, constantly changing shots, sort of emphasizing the chaos of just a basic everyday conversation and having like dramatic cuts in between each scene that happens to sort of set the mood as simultaneously extremely mundane yet unsettling because you know something extremely weird and dramatic is happening. But I could hardly focus on that because while the dialogue in this movie is very good all the way throughout, for the first 30 minutes or so, it is absolutely exceptional. It just nails the vibe of like a gathering of like, I guess you would call it like a group of family friends who know each other extremely well, yet don't see each other very often. Sort of that awkward small talk, talking over each other dynamic, the types of jokes they were making that like weren't going out of their way to be super witty or funny. Stuff that wouldn't necessarily really make anybody laugh, but is there to establish a sense of realism and groundedness in the story. And I thought that that was a very, very important groundwork to lay for once everything gets like super absurd and ridiculous later. Just overall, uncanny to see such convincing acting and extremely mundane things happening. This is the case for a lot of horror movies, but this one just happens to do it exceptionally well. Where at the beginning, if it's a little bit more of a slow burn, you're just sitting there paying attention to everything, reading into all of these seemingly casual interactions, knowing that something is up. There's something darker going on. And you don't really know what to expect, and you're reading into everything. You have that uncanny valley feeling of like, everything feels so genuine. Like, what am I sitting here watching? It's just people having mundane conversation at the dinner table and meeting back up. What is going wrong? What's not like the other? It had my mind racing in a really good way. I was very stressed throughout the beginning of the movie. As it progressed, though, there's a bunch of tomfoolery with the timeline that happens, which I will not pretend to have followed particularly well whatsoever. I suspected from the beginning, since they first went out and since it was first revealed that it was them in there, obviously I began to expect, hey, you know, maybe the people who came back to the house, Amir and Hugh, I believe their names were, are not the original Amir and Hugh, and I'm not sure if they have some sort of like duplicitous evil scheme to kill everybody yet, or if they even know that they're not the original Amir and Will, and I was onto that. But that's like only the first layer of many, because by like the third quarter of the movie, it's just an absolute clusterfuck. It's like two of the people are from one house, one of the people's from a third house, and then three of the people are from the second house. It's really confusing. I'm not going to pretend to have followed it all the way, but you can see the seeds being planted as early as the beginning scenes, as I remember them being having a lot of like confusion where it was about the girl doing yoga in particular. Seeds were absolutely planted from the beginning, and many of the important plot points predate the actual events of the movie by as much as 10 years, which happens to culminate in literally my favorite movie scene that I've seen in a while, which is where Mike, the alcoholic dude, is talking to Hugh, and Hugh's like extremely pissed at him, and Mike just like, the less context I give you, the better. Mike just looks at him, he's like, I slept with your wife in every single dimension. And then Hugh just fucking sucker punches him and like knocks him down to the floor. And then he's like down on the floor, extremely hurt. And then an alternate reality version of himself walks through the door, drunk as fuck, and kills him while he's on the ground and finishes the job. It's just an insane scene. Absolutely wild. That was like the height of the movie's absurdity for me. Honestly, even more so than when the main girl ends up killing herself twice, but herself also surviving one or both of the times. I was extremely confused by that. I guess I'll get to what I think happened at the end. I think her being dead in the bathroom was supposed to be like a perfect allegory for Schrodinger's box. Like, the door was closed. Nobody knew if that girl was in the shower or if not. Nobody was tipped off to it. And so it just turned out that even though we saw her there, she just wasn't there when the other lady came in, Beth, or I think her name was Beth, to take a shower. She just happened not to be there. Really doesn't make sense, does it? Listen, I'm not sure what happened at the end, but the exact continuity is not nearly as important as the thematic underpinnings of the movie. It had a very strong theme of the importance of decisions that we make and regret. Sorry, I just broke out into a random fit of sneezing. But as I was saying, the thematic concepts explored in this movie were primarily that of regret, decisions, longing for, and sort of being stuck on what could have been, the power you have as a moral agent to make decisions for yourself, and the fact that, you are not so much at the mercy of your universe as you are in control of it. But that being said, you cannot change the past. The past is in the past. You have to go forward and make better decisions moving forward, which I think is reflected by the main girl getting caught at the end, even though everything seems to have worked out perfectly and she seems to have gotten away with the murder of herself. Very weird stuff. It's interesting though, because you have the alcoholic character, you have tons of different webs of love affairs happening and histories where this girl used to be with that guy and now that guy's with a totally different girl, and there's static between them. That dynamic is done 2.5 times. It's a very complicated web of relationships with a lot of tensions boiling underneath. And not only does that add to the vibe, does that add to the atmosphere of it all and makes it just that much more stressful, but also it sort of serves to highlight what could have been, the relationships that could have been, the opportunities that could have been. For example, the main character girl being able to dance or whatever. I don't know what the hell they were talking about, but it was something about dancing. Some really major dancer came on, even though it was her show, hijacked it, and they offered her to play understudy. She felt disrespected. She didn't want to be the understudy, but then the big famous girl ended up getting injured or something right at the last minute, and the understudy stepped up and is now one of the most renowned dancers in the world. And it was just a horribly unfortunate missed opportunity that I'm sure the main character kicks herself for every day. And it's interesting because she has a relationship with somebody, one of the guys, and he's asking her to go to Vietnam with him for work for, I believe, 4 months. I think he proposes that she only go for 1 month, but it's like implied that she's going to go for at least a meaningful period of time. And she's just extremely indecisive about it. And I think that's a direct result of how badly she was scarred by that absolutely horrible circumstance with getting shafted as the lead dancer in her own production. So it's like a pivotal point in her character's life, which informs her decisions and thematically informs the movie as she begins to see different realities at the end and chooses finally to be in one that's basically, peaches and creamville. Everything's always holly and jolly over there. And doesn't work out for her in the end. She presumably gets caught by her... I'm not even going to begin to try to understand it, but the point is you can't live in the past. You can't dwell too much on what could have been, the other universes that could have been, and not appreciate and emphasize the decisions that you're making in the present and future. And I think that's actually also reflected by, at the beginning of the movie, everybody wanting to go out so much. Everybody wanted to interact with the other people, despite it clearly being in their best interest to just all stay inside. They all wanted to interact with that other version of themselves. They all wanted to, reminisce at this big gathering. They all wanted to, or at least were overcome by feelings of wanting to revisit what could have been in terms of the relationships and the general downfall of some of their lives. And it sort of tempted them into doing something incredibly unwise and getting themselves all mixed up. In some examples, in some of these universes, probably killed. Now, you can make the argument that none of the character writing means anything because every single universe exists in this movie, which ironically, like the fact that their choices make different universes, the fact that they even have choices strips them of their free will because it means it's totally random and they don't have any, you don't have any say in something if it could go either way. Because if there are two realities that are identical, up to one point where somebody has to choose between red and orange, and everything about it is identical, but one reality they choose red and one reality they choose orange, either not everything was actually the same leading up to that, and there was some sort of discrepancy in their life experience that led them to picking orange over red that the other version did not have, or they don't have any free will, and it's literally just random, because it's not informed by their experiences at all or their personality. So really, no matter how you look at it, when you sort of zoom out and have these thought experiments, free will is never going to exist, and that includes in this movie. And I was trying not to get too caught up on that, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting. It was a confusing movie. It was a thematically poignant movie. It was a movie with a very unique atmosphere and vibe. And I thoroughly enjoyed it because it's kind of a cool puzzle to fit together with all these different versions of these different characters and their motivations and where their lives went wrong. It's neat. It's neat. It's the type of movie you can really get off into the weeds with. You can really get into this movie. Like, if you become obsessed with it, you're in luck because there's a lot of content to dig into. So yeah, pretty much everything I have to say about it. It was pretty good. I'd be interested to hear Aesop or anyone else who's seen this movie's thoughts on it in the comments. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. Have a good one, guys.